Well, hello and welcome to the next round of our Gracie interview series. This is an important programming initiative that we undertake at the Alliance for Women in Media that has been advancing women in media for more than 70 years. We take very seriously the role of programming and scholarships, and today we are very fortunate to have with us two legends in radio who have been impacting our industry for many years. And so I'm personally looking forward to this conversation, which will be led by Mike McVay, who is the president of McVay Media. And so Mike, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you, Becky. Very much appreciated. Our guest today, Deborah Parenti, is the president and publisher of Radio Inc. and Radio and Television Business Report. She succeeded Eric Rhodes, chairman and founder of Radio Inc., at the helm of the publication, which he established in 1992. She's also led the company's radio conference division since 2007. And that includes Forecast, the Hispanic Radio Conference, which I know is upcoming, and the Radio Masters Sales Summit. The things that this woman has done in her career is pretty remarkable. An experienced broadcast professional. You broke the glass ceiling in Dayton radio as the first woman to manage a major station in the market in 1990. You were one of the first market consolidators. You developed a sales platform called Radio First. You built out an organizational chart, both which became models in the industry. Your career also includes stints in Louisville, and she managed in Philadelphia. She has contributed to panels at the NAB, the RAB, and the Country Radio Seminar, featured in Working Women magazine and the Wall Street Journal, and you participated in the 2001 and 2002 NABEF Broadcast Leadership Training Program. In 2022, I was honored to be there to see her achieve and receive the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Dayton Broadcasters Hall of Fame, where she's been a member since being inducted in 2009. And along with Martin Sheen, this is a good one, save this one for a trivia question, or if you're on Jeopardy. Along with Martin Sheen, Deborah is a Chaminade Julian High School Distinguished Alumni Honoree. Did I say the name of the school right?
Yes, you did.
Okay, good. I did okay there then.
Yeah.
I know that you focus much of your time today on using your publications, Radio Inc. and Radio Television Business Report, to spotlight initiatives in the industry, to promote initiatives that provide outreach, education, and advancement for women, minorities, and young people, all who aspire to join our radio industry. And so let's start there. I know you're on the foundation board for the Alliance for Women in Media, and that's somewhere you've been associated for a long time, since 2014. Tell us about
10 years.
10 years, exactly, almost. Tell us about helping women get started. And that's going to be a lot of our conversation today, is around what you've lived through and what you've seen and how much the industry has changed since you got into the business. So how did you start your career? What was your career path? And what took you from there, that starting point, to where you are now?
Oh, it's a long story, but I'll abbreviate it. I actually took, in my freshman year at Ohio University, decided, my major was going to be speech pathology, but I started taking some courses in radio and television, and I'd had an interest in that for a long time. A fan of a radio station, a legendary station at that time, WING in Dayton, one of the first top 40 stations, a station that I listened to. And at the age of 16, I joined a junior achievement group and sold a survey, a marketing survey, to the general manager for a total of $40. We were sponsored by one of the baby bells at that time, Ohio Bell, later AT&T. But he was impressed with that. And so during my summer break from college, I went around knocking on doors at his radio station and others, looking for an internship. He didn't have anything, but he called me later, and they had, Mike, believe it or not, an opportunity in the print shop. Yes, they had their own print press. And would I be able to print, which was kind of a different path. You have to realize back then women came in through secretarial positions, assistant positions. This was kind of an odd way, particularly for a female, to get in, but I immediately said, yes, I can do this. I don't think there's ever been a job. In fact, John Guerin, who was with American Radio Systems, once accused me of never saying that I couldn't do something. He said, if I ask you if you could, do brain surgery, you'd say, yeah. I said, well, there's a book out there, I'm sure somewhere, that could, bring us along. But that's where I started. And rather than go back to school, to the chagrin of my parents, I took a full-time job for $75 and gave up a part-time job at Kroger Grocery. I was making more money at. But from the moment I walked in, I was, as I said at the recent Broadcasters Foundation breakfast, it wasn't the sound on the air or seeing the on-air lights. It was the smell of chocolate and how involved the station was in giving back to the community. So that's where I got my start. And I will also say it was a good one because I printed everything, promotional materials, rate cards, so I learned a little bit about every piece of the business just by being down there. And little did I know the graphic arts years later with Radio Inc. would come in handy. So,
well, and I mentioned already that you were on the foundation board for the Alliance for Women in Media, but you served on the board of the Library of American Broadcasting Foundation for some time. What now?
I'm still on that board. Yeah.
And so the philanthropic approach you have, I'll throw you a little bit of a curveball. But that, along with the articles that I see you embrace in your publications, you really are an advocate for our industry, not just the women in industry, but the industry itself. Talk about that for a second, because we know that we do need more women in a lot of different areas of our broadcast industry.
Oh, absolutely. There is something, in my mind, magical about radio. And Mike, I think this is something we can share. It is, as they say, theater of the mind. I also like to say that they never say that the best thing about you is behind your eyes, but it's what's between your ears. And what's between your ears, of course, is your brain. But the ability to take, whether it's a commercial, a song, a bit, a liner, and create magic with words that in every mind comes out a little bit differently. That has always, to me, been a fascinating point. And that, along with that connection that makes with those listeners, it's a companion. And again, it's a companion that it doesn't demand anything of you. It wants to be your friend. It's always there. And of course, recently with the spotlight on AM, how much AM radio and radio overall serves communities throughout this country. We're not like networks that fly in to the area when the tornado hits. We've been there all along. As, by the way, of course, our TV brethren have the same thing. But radio can be taken anywhere. I just read a letter today from a gentleman who had sent a letter to the NAB regarding the NAB's, fight for AM and in support of that, about a hurricane recently that destroyed a high school. 4 lives were lost. And the only thing that kept that community informed and together was AM radio. There are swaths of rural areas where there are no cell towers still in this country. We need that. As you can tell, you get me on a soapbox, but that's what I love about this industry and the people in it as well. There are a lot of good people who do a lot of good things, and there are a lot of people in the ranks and files of the industry, like I like to call it, don't make a whole lot of money, but they're out there with their station banners. Whether it's a disaster or remote broadcast, they're serving that public. And when you see people walk up to those individuals, the personalities, you realize how important those people are to that community. I used to tell our personalities, you are probably, in many cases, the closest thing to Hollywood some of these people will ever meet. Now, that doesn't make them more important, no more than Hollywood makes somebody important, but it's somebody that people recognize, they look up to, they want to have those heroes and your local market heroes.
When I first joined the board of directors of the Alliance for Women in Media Foundation, one of the first things I was asked was, who is my hero? Who do I look up to? And on the website, you'll find that I said my mother, because I grew up in a female dominant household where my mother took me to the father-son banquets and breakfasts. And I think what that must have been like for her in the 60s when I was just a little kid, and it wasn't until I was much older that I realized what a hero she was.
Yeah.
You are a shatterer of that glass ceiling. What was it like for women in media when you were starting your career versus what it's like today?
Well, I can tell you, and I give these stories, or I repeat them, not out of angst or bitterness or anything like that, but it does tell you where we've come. When I got into radio, midday, 10 to 3, was housewife time. Women were the majority listeners at that time in the home. We did things like homemaker spectaculars where women would come down, they get their ticket for the theater, we'd have a movie and we'd be giving away blenders and toasters. I mean, that was a big deal. I also stood, though, in front of a sales manager one time who chastised me and told me verbatim, I know you have big dreams. I think you can forget about that. You'll never make more than $150 a week in this business. And by the way, that was like in the 1980s. Now, I know a lot of these women listening maybe weren't born until the 80s, but it wasn't that long ago. There were no role models for women like myself at that time. It's kind of funny, and it always sort of gets me when people will say, you're a role model. There weren't any other women like that at that time. It's like, me? But you forget because you've been around for so long. And you're right. My first broadcasters meeting, at the risk of, and I won't mention names, but my first Dayton area broadcasters meeting as a manager, I was asked 2 questions. Would I pass the bread? And could they count the polka dots on my dress? That was 1990. That wasn't that long ago.
No. And I think, women, all of us, have to remind ourselves that a lot of people like you and others who have shattered that glass ceiling are role models now, and people can look up to you. I know from a programming standpoint, when I talk to some of the most successful women who are on the air now, women who are, from the 70s and 80s, they will tell me that when they started, they only had men to listen to model themselves after. And so we're very fortunate today that there are so many women who have advanced in both radio and television into those management positions.
May I make a comment on that too?
Yes, please.
That when we talk about that, well, number one, and it leads back to the Alliance, quite frankly, and the work that's done there. We have emphasized, but women, minorities, even young men, we always talk about advancing to leadership positions, being defined as the top of the food chain, the CEO, the president, the general manager, or whatever. And I think we have to recognize that leadership comes in a variety of stripes, and not every, there are only so many CEO or manager jobs out there, but there are also different qualifications. And some people who are tremendous air personalities don't aspire to be, or wouldn't make a great program director. There are some doctors that would not make great chiefs of staff, but they're a great heart surgeon. So, and what I like about what we do with the Alliance is that we foster careers at all levels. To me, leading is leading in what you do, but it doesn't have to have that managerial title behind it. And I think we need to recognize that, because sometimes we push people in directions that really, they're either not suited for, or they don't really want, but they have a career path. And we need to, I think it's always important. When I talk to young people, I try to find out really, what do you want? Or what do you think you want at this point in time? You may change your mind as the world opens wider to you, but what is it that you want? What's your talent that you really want to try to pursue and build upon? And I think it's really important that we foster what they want to do, not what we have decided are, well, these are where you need to aspire to be. If that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense, and thank you, because it's a great point. The experiences you have, I mean, the skills you've perfected come from many different positions, including promotion and marketing and sales and finance and actual management and mastering leadership. Like many of us, you bang into things and you figure out what works and what doesn't. But how have you developed so many skills? And to your point, what can those who are earlier in their careers do to develop the skills for the area that they want to live and work in?
I think, well, number one, and I realize that this doesn't play out for everyone, but I happen to be the oldest of 5 children. My parents were very young when I was born, so I was kind of thrust upon to lead the ones behind me that came behind me. But I've always had a very inquisitive, I like to know what all the objections are to something so I can figure out the solution. So I guess you might say I'm a bit of a generalist along that line. And I've been very fortunate, though, that I've been given a lot of different opportunities throughout my career. I had a manager, and you can't say enough for mentors and managers who take you under their wing. I had a manager who thought I could do anything, and he gave me everything, along that line. When we started the marketing department at a radio station, I want you to be in charge of it. You want me? Yeah, you can do this. I believe in you, which, by the way, is another favorite adage of mine. We always tell people to believe in themselves. I think it is equally, if not more important, to tell people you believe in them. There's nothing like having somebody say, I believe in you. You can look in the mirror all day long and say, I believe in me. And you need to do that. You need to believe in yourself, but you need a camp around you. You need supporters. You need somebody else. I would tell anybody listening to this today, after you've listened to it, if you do nothing else, stop and think about somebody and tell them you believe in them, whether it's your child or a coworker, whoever. Tell somebody you believe in them. You will not only make their day, you might make their career. That's how mine was made, quite frankly. And I would, as far as other people are concerned, as finding that career path, be open to everything. Don't be afraid to do something. I didn't know a credit from a debit, but when I was asked to be a business manager, I said, once again, just like printing, yeah, I can do that. Now, how many nights I went home and sweated it out? And this is back before we had computerization, so everything was on a big, long adding machine tape. And if you were off a penny, go find it. But I wanted to know what the business side was like. And yet I was still dabbling at that station in promotions and marketing, because that's always kind of been my linchpin. I love marketing things. I love promoting things. I love seeing things come to life, whether it's a personality or a promotion or a project, whatever. So
I think there's great advice in what you just said, in that if any of us have an aspiration to what we want to do, then spend time learning other areas. I was very fortunate that when I wanted to be a market manager someday, and not a lot of market managers come from programming. And so when I got to Louisville, Kentucky, part of the deal I asked for was that I would be allowed to sit in on a sales meeting once a week, and that I could have 5 clients.
Whoa.
Yeah. Now I had to go find the 5 clients.
They'd be I'm telling you, there's a lot of stations that would be looking for you right now.
Yeah.
Somebody like that. There's good advice there.
But it taught me sales because as a programmer, I didn't have that. And by the way, it gave me a greater respect for what you've done and people like you've done in generating, real revenue. So the leap from Dayton, Ohio, you get to the top of the rung in Dayton, Ohio, and then you go to Philadelphia. And at least outwardly, that looks like a big leap. Tell us about that and what led to making that move and what did you learn from making that move?
It's a kind of a funny story. And I will clean it up a little bit. Steve Dodge had decided to sell our stations. This is before ARS sold to CBS, which became Odyssey. I was not real happy about that particular move. We had just done our renovation and everything. And I had an inquiry, I guess you might say, from Brian Beasley at Beasley Broadcasting. So I got to talking to him about it in the meantime. And I came up with a list of what I thought were 10 incredibly impossible, they'd never do it. Well, this is what I need before I would come. And he said yes. We got down to number 9, and I'm thinking, well, Joanne walked into my office and she's like, Joanne was my assistant and Mike knows her. And she's like signaling me like, how's it going? I'm like, they're saying yes to everything. And meanwhile, I had told Steve Dodge that they could sell the station, but this Gary Ayer did not necessarily go with it. So I kind of backed myself into it, you might say, that way. It wasn't that I really wanted to leave Dayton, but I didn't know what the future was going to hold there. And I had 2 kids and I was putting them through college and I had an opportunity to manage in a top 5 market. And once again, I thought, I can do this. I can do this. And so I went up and, it was a really interesting and very challenging kind of a situation, because while everything, radio is the same, a point's a point, revenue is revenue, people are people and everything, there is a difference between major markets and how they are structured. And where, speaking of points, that 1 point means gazillions as opposed to a million in Dayton. So you're walking a little bit of a different line. You're also working with people with different types of egos that you haven't worked with before. So it was interesting, it was challenging, but it was also a lot of fun. I had a great team while I was there. I enjoyed it. And it was 90 minutes from what was then my hairdresser in New York, rather than a plane ride. And that's how R&R wrote it up. She moved because she's taking Philadelphia because she'll be closer to her hairdresser in New York.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. All those great business reasons. But I learned an awful lot up there. And it was a really good, I think it was a good learning experience along that line. And yes, there were differences, but you do learn that radio is radio wherever you go and people are people. So.
Dan Mason, who had run CBS Radio at one time, very well known in our industry, was trying to encourage me to do something with one of their businesses. And I just didn't want to move. I'm in Northeast Ohio, raising the children here. And he said something that was really important, though. And, where the phrase came from originally, I don't know. But he said the turtle only gets ahead when he sticks out his neck. And certainly you and I have both done that a number of times in our careers that have given us life experiences and business experience. And probably that job gave you a bigger perspective which has enabled you to do this job.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely. There were so many things, more not so much the station itself, because remember, I'd been running 6 stations. So running one was actually could be on days boring because there weren't as many people around. But at the same time, the market dynamics, working with, or sitting across the table at a luncheon speaking of CBS, the manager from the CBS stations. You got to learn and meet a lot of different people, a lot of bigger names and people who had more experiences in more areas or more markets than I'd had before. So again, being the person, I've always loved to sit there and hear. I love hearing the stories. I love listening to the old jingles. I love, and if you're in radio, sit down and talk to me. I'll buy you a drink and keep talking. I just want to hear what your perspective is. You learn so many things along that line. Not to mention that I think having done that also set me up for what I'm doing today. Because had I stayed where I was, I might have just stayed there forever and not, taken not looked for any more risks or anything like that. But by the time then Eric Rhodes called me, I was like, yeah. And I don't know, had I not been in Philadelphia, if he'd have even thought of Deborah in Dayton.
Yeah, that's why I say I think it is a real positive. Every big job I've ever taken expanded my experience level, and that led to another big job. And certainly Streamline Publishing puts you at the intersection of media, radio, TV, podcasting. What's the most important thing that broadcasters should be focused on today?
I think we need to continue to focus on the AM situation. I've never seen broadcasters come together in my number of years in this industry, which are many, about 50 overall since I first started. I have never seen them coalesce around something like they have the AM issue so far. But I also know how broadcasters and quite frankly, human nature is. We tend to, board just said they're going to reverse their course. It's all good now. Well, it's still not all good, because a course reversed can be reversed again, as you'll read in my next Radio Inc. column. And there are still manufacturers out there who have not changed their minds about this. And I still believe as such, it's going to take a congressional act to give us that, actually not us, but to give the country that safety net that they will have AM radio should they need it in their cars. So I think that's a big issue. And it's not going to go away until, it's not resolved yet. I think AI is obviously a big issue. It's kind of a sexy issue right now on some areas because of what it can be helpful for. It's also, there's a lot of dangers there inherent to it. But it's something that can be game changing. And I don't mean by that, I think we need to, not focus on will it replace a personality, but how can it enhance what a personality is doing? Because we all only have so many hours in the clock. Can it help push out the social media? Everything's got to be checked. Again, there are inherent dangers in this and questions about it. But I think that's another thing. But I think the biggest thing is, and I think AM demonstrated is broadcasters need to learn to speak more as one voice. If we ever get this debt ceiling through, and by the time this interview is over with, hopefully that will be taken care of. But by God, if they can finally get some agreement, we can certainly get more agreement within our industry on everything from Local Radio Freedom Act to, what course we're going to take on various things, minority tax certificates. That's another important thing.
Yeah, all of those focuses, and back to AM for a second. Ford's only said through 2024.
Right.
They've not pushed it further down the road. So I look forward to seeing your article. And not to name drop, but I was at a recent concert that Brad Paisley performed at and was able to go backstage with some other radio people and media. And as we were chatting, he brought it up. He had seen the news on it and said, I'm really worried about AM going away out of the car. And I said, really? I'm thrilled to hear that. And he said, yeah, and it's not for my music. I live in Nashville. We get tornadoes. That's where I go. And so I think, as you touched on earlier in this conversation, it's very important. I've got one big final question, and I think it ties back to, we are the Alliance for Women in Media. You and I are
Right.
both on the foundation board. What would you tell 20-year-old Deborah that would help her for today? What would that message be if Superman or Superwoman flew around the world backwards and turned back the hands of time? What would you tell 20-year-old Deborah?
I'd have an awful lot of wisdom I could impart to that youngster. Not to be afraid of anybody or anything. Not to, for lack of a better word, have tunnel vision on what you do. Don't let the riffraff around you distract you from where you want to go. At the same time, don't have such tunnel vision that you don't open your eyes and look around and see what else is out there. I also think that, balance in life is also important. Balance can also bring you other, career openers as well in the career that you want to be in. But I mean, if you're just, you learn so much from so many people. I go back to, as I mentioned to you before, I loved marketing. I still love marketing. Some of my greatest initial marketing knowledge came from working for a grocery store and how they marketed within the supermarket, merchandising and everything. So again, you never know where you're going to pick it up. So while don't let anybody deter you from focusing. Still be open to what else is out there. Listen to other people. Don't be closed-minded. And your way is not necessarily the highway. I know myself, I've known for being very stubborn, and that can be, I have to remind myself, listen.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both so much. That was incredibly insightful. First of all, I really appreciate, Deborah, your focus and reminder, staying on top of current issues, right? Like what's happening in AM radio, tax credits, those parts of our industry that are really critically important. And I wrote down, and I will never forget, I feel confident, Deborah, that you have done more than pass the bread and count polka dots. So thank you for having done more than that in our industry, because you have, as Mike said, broken every glass ceiling that existed so that other women like us can continue to forge this path. And we are the reason that this organization exists. So thank you, Mike, for the conversation. Thank you, Deborah, for everything that you've done in our industry. And we invite everyone to continue to engage with the Alliance for Women in Media on our website at allwomeninmedia.org. We invite you to join AWM. We have member networks to connect. You can meet people like Mike and Deborah, get their wisdom directly one-on-one. Donate to our foundation. That is another way to continue programming that is really important like this. So with that, we appreciate the time and look forward to seeing you on our next interview series.